Hello YouTubers! Welcome to Big Buddha is Watching. I'm Big Buddha and today I'm looking at Diary of the Dead from 2007, the fifth film in George A. Romero's Dead series, or Living Dead series, depending on your take. A change of pace this time around, and here we get Romero really falling into the what I call the Terrence Malick trap, which is that you get a director who realizes he's not getting any younger, and if he wants to create more in his output and put more into his body of work, because he doesn't feel that he's said everything that he wanted to say with his work so far, he starts then churning out work at a greater rate, whereas before he was less than prolific. He Romero released one of these zombie movies on average every 10 years. There was a 20-year wait between Day and Land, and only a 2-year wait between Land and Diary, and another 2-year wait between Diary and Survivor. So you get work churned out at a much faster rate, and not necessarily to better effect. I think the fact that he felt the need to push these films out at a greater rate really led to a law of diminishing returns when it came to the quality of the projects, like you might argue with Malick's work of recent years. So there's that to take into account, which is a shame, really. I say this is a different sort of change of pace with regards to this film, when it comes to this film compared to the others, for a number of reasons. One is the fact that Romero, before he made Land of the Dead, which was made with studio money, and the studio really wanted something in the vein of his original movies, and something to capitalise on the success of zombie movies in recent years. 28 Days Later and the Dawn of the Dead remake. So, and that's very much what you got from him. You felt very much that he was a director for hire, although for hire to make something that was distinctly his own voice, but still somebody that was at the whim of the studios. Here he's making an independent film on a much lower budget. This film only had a budget of $2 million, as opposed to the 15 or 19, depending on which source you read, that he had for Land. So you get something that's much more personal. Romero, before he made Land, he wanted to make a film about what he called emerging media, which is the fact that he really recognised the culture and Andy Warhol's prophecy of everybody being famous for 15 minutes coming true. He saw that the youth of today all had cameras and were all churning out work and all had easy access to the internet, and he wanted to make a horror movie which kind of capitalized on that. And I guess he the way he got funding to do this was to say, yes, it's going to be another one of his zombie movies. The last one turned a profit, so if he could have a few more $1 million, he could go off and make another one of these, and hopefully turn a profit. This film wasn't quite as successful as Land was at the box office, but it was made on a much lower budget, so I guess the success of this film meant he then got to go on and make another movie, Survival of the Dead. But so the original genesis of this project was the fact that he wanted to do something about emerging media, and that that culminated into doing something that hadn't been done at that stage, which was to do a found footage zombie movie. Found footage movies really came to prominence with the Blair Witch Project back in 1999, where you had a new subgenre of horror movie emerging. You had a movie that purported to be found footage, i.e., the characters in the films, in the narrative of the film, all hold cameras, and what you see is entirely within these films supposed to be shot by the characters. So it lends the film a different feel than other horror movies, something that feels, well, or should feel much more realistic and frightening in that respect. So it kind of lends itself well to be to the horror genre. It has been utilised in other genres, of course, with say with sci-fi, like with the start of District 9 or Cloverfield, or the superhero genre with Chronicle. But it really works best with the horror genre in some respects, And of course, the other reason we got a proliferation of found footage movies after the Blair Witch Project is they were cheap to make. I think in terms of budget to box office, the Blair Witch Project is still the most successful film of all time. And after that, you got, the Paranormal Activity movies. I think you've got like 5 or 6 in that franchise so far. And the reason they're able to churn these out, like any horror movies really, is because they're cheap to do and they're profitable. It's cheap to create a scare. You really just need something sudden appearing on screen and a quick sound effect, and you've got a jump scare, and which is why you sometimes get whole movies that are just made up of jump scares. Same with comedy as well. Comedy's cheap to do. I think the biggest it doesn't cost a lot to make people laugh. It might cost a lot to hire the right comedians for the role, which is why the comedies tend to be a bit more expensive than horror movies. Horror movies tend to get by with unknowns in the cast because you really don't mind seeing people you have no affinity with getting slaughtered in their droves on screen. So where am I going with this? So so 2007, the found footage movie was really, it was really at its zenith at that time, and Romero decided to throw his hat into the ring and try one for himself. A found footage zombie movie. I think to date it's the only example of its kind. That's maybe the reason you haven't seen one since is because, if I was kind to this movie, I'd say that Romero made the definitive found footage zombie movie. If I was being slightly less kind, is I'd say that Romero proved that it just wasn't a good idea in the first place. The film does kind of, with the themes inherent in the film of emerging media and Romero wanting to comment on the way young people treat media these days, and how we all feel we have a right to air our own voice to the world via the internet and the technology we have at hand. It smacks a little of an old man trying to sound contemporary, unfortunately. But it can't be denied that, the intentions were pure. Giving us a slightly different zombie movie aesthetically with this time around. It can't be argued that he wasn't at least trying to do something a bit different. If he just made another zombie movie like Survival, for example. I think. I think I'd criticise him more for doing that, for just cranking something out, because that would seem a much more of a cynical move. At least with this film, it feels like there wasn't at least an attempt there to do something original, and no pun intended, to give a shot in the arm to the Living Dead series. And so I can't fault him on his ambitions. But maybe the execution wasn't quite up to standard. I mean, with the found footage movie, you really, I guess it's the misconception is they're easy to do. I think a lot of people go into them thinking, oh, we can, because I have seen some really bad examples of found footage movies, and they're ones where the filmmakers obviously, excuse me, they obviously just thought, oh, we can go out with a camera and a bunch of actors and make it up as we go along, and magic will happen like it did in the Blair Witch Project. But in actual fact, the Blair Witch Project, although it was largely shot by the actors in the film, it was meticulously planned out beforehand. There was a story there that the directors hammered out, and they just decided that they were going to get the cast of the film to live that for real. So you've really got to meticulously plan out a story and your beats and how you shoot this stuff to create it. It's important to create a film that feels genuine and authentic, but it isn't. It's all an illusion at the end of the day. I mean, this film does have a plot. Funnily enough, a different kind of plot than we're used to seeing with the other films in the Dead series. Actually, all the Dead films to date have primarily taken place in a single location, or for the most part in a single location. It's the Dead films have all been about people holed up in either a house or a shopping mall or a missile silo, or I guess a whole city is as expansive as Romero got in this series. And through that, he kind of created a sense of claustrophobia and dread through having trapped characters. Here you don't have that. Here you have something slightly different. You have a road movie. You have characters traveling through the zombie apocalypse and meeting other survivors along the way. So you get a far more episodic feeling film than other entries in the series. All Romero's Dead films seem to end with characters hitting the road, and that's them essentially escaping the situation that they've been trapped in for the past 2 hours. And here, the film doesn't end with characters hitting the road. The film actually begins with characters hitting the road. This film actually begins where most of the other entries in the series end, and so you get a different feel story wise, and it feels much more episodic. It feels in a funny way kind of like a greatest hits version of the Dead series so far. You get all the cliches of the series played out. A character encountering family members, but they're now zombified, but she can't bring herself to kill them because they're her family. So you get that. You get vigilante groups set up. You get encounters with the military, and them being portrayed as bastards like they are in all the films. Romero has a real hard time with the military for some reason. I don't know quite what the story is there, but they're never ever portrayed well in his films. And you get, the human conflicts, the still alive members of the story, conflicting with each other, and the point being, I guess, in all these films that the zombie plague really isn't the thing you should worry about. It's the survivors of the zombie plague who could be more dangerous. So you get all that. The thing you got to buy into about this being a fake documentary, I think, is the most problematic element of the film for several reasons. One, for the found footage films have to feel kind of genuine and realistic, and that's a problem when you have a director like Romero, who is notorious for getting terribly wooden performances from his cast. And this is no exception. This movie kind of falls down in the fact that you have not terribly good or convincing performances coming from all the cast members, so you never buy that this is genuine. The concept of the conceit of the film is, the main protagonist, I think her name's Daisy. This is meant to be a documentary that she's actually edited together after the events of the film have all been shot, and her voiceover at the start of the film says, I've edited it where appropriate to create a narrative, and I've added music where I thought it was appropriate. And so you get the film almost apologising for itself very early on, and I think you're on shaky ground when a film feels it needs to apologise for its own artifice early on. You also have the problem of, because at least the first 20 minutes of this film, only one of the characters in the narrative has a camera, so you get these long continuous takes. When you have a found footage film, you don't really have as great a reliance on creating scares in the editing suite as well. So you're on shaky ground there, and they compensate. Romero compensates for this later on in the film when he has another character find a camera, and then he incorporates other elements like CCTV footage and camera phones and all sorts of trickery to create just to create other angles. Really, I mean, I think in Dawn of the Dead, he had in all the zombie scenes he had two cameras running simultaneously a lot of the time, and he managed to create a great energy to any scene where the characters encountered zombies simply through editing. Here he doesn't have the luxury of doing that. I mean, the zombie scenes are still. They're really well shot. They're actually some of my favourite zombie scenes in any of his films. I think he really, if there's one, the biggest credit I will give to this film is that Romero still knows what he's doing when he's shooting zombies, because they still feel like a genuine horror moments when zombies appear in this film. They're creepy. The scenes are atmospheric. They're lit just right, and he still creates that air of apocalyptic dread that's inherent in all of his films. So I will say for the film that it's, if you just want a standalone bog standard zombie movie, it does deliver on that front. It's just I think he was like over encumbered by his own ambitions in a funny sort of way. He wasn't the filmmaker to make this film. Um, I think it was, like I say, he just feels like an old man criticising the youth, and I think maybe a younger filmmaker with more energy would have pulled off the conceit far more successfully. But maybe a younger filmmaker wouldn't have pulled off the horror element quite as successfully. Who knows? Um, there's a couple of things. There's a scene where they for some reason they stop at an Amish community, and they meet a deaf Amish fellow called Samuel. I really like this character. He throws a stick of dynamite into a crowd of zombies at one point, and it blows up. And as the guts rain down over his head, you just see him standing there, and he's holding his placard, and it says, "Hi, I'm Samuel." I thought, oh, this is going to be a fun character. But he gets killed in the next scene. I was like, oh, okay. What was the point of him then? What else was I going to say? Yeah. Like I said in all these films, one of the things I've come to admire about Romero is he really is an intelligent filmmaker and a writer, and in all these films he is. You can tell he's a man with something to say. This is no exception. There's a there is one older character amongst all the 20 somethings in this film, and he's a college lecturer with a drinking problem, and I guess watching the film that he's really supposed to be Romero's voice writ large on the screen. I don't know, but he certainly has the most philosophical moments when it comes to describing what he sees as his students are doing. He talks at one point about them creating a document of horror. Oh yeah, it's. I forgot to mention that this film, all the films in the Dead series to the up until this point have really been sequels to each other. But this is more of a reboot of the series. This starts with in the real world, the zombie outbreak breaks out. Apparently, Romero did this because he didn't believe that in a world where a zombie infestation was now, what would it be at the time, 40 years old now. He didn't realise there'd be media studies students going to college in this world, or maybe even no education system at all. So that was his way of. He was really had no choice but to reboot the series and restart the timeline again. He does say that this film does take place in the same universe as Night of the Living Dead. I don't see how this film can really take place concurrently with the civil rights movement. I guess what he means by that is the events of Night of the Living Dead are probably happening concurrently with this, but it's the 2007 version of events rather than the 1968 version of events. So it's hard to say where this film really fits into the timeline with the other films. It doesn't really. It's kind of its own separate world, and where survival fits into the timeline as well. That could really come from either timeline, really. Yeah, that's all I've got to say, really. It's not terrible. The zombie scenes are well done and memorable. And if you're looking for just a good scare movie for a Friday night or a Saturday night, this does deliver. But on the whole, it's kind of unsuccessful. It's kind of hampered by its own ambitions in a way. So I can't give it a full recommendation. So that's Diary of the Dead. Join me for my next review, which will be Survival, and then who knows what I'll do after that. I was thinking maybe I might do the Reanimator films. It's funny. I'm not really a horror guy, but I've done a lot of since I've started this channel. I've done a lot of horror movies and zombie movies in particular. But I suppose I am a zombie movie guy, so I'll maybe keep going until I get bored with them. Who knows? So until next time, this is me, Big Buddha, signing off, and I'll see you all out there in YouTube land.